she can't do that. And I kept explaining to them that what I heard her say was, she didn't do it for all
She did it for
victims.
herself.
She did it for herself.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes sense.
Yes.
And I've given
That's
sermons
my
about
point.
that.
Yeah.
She did it because that's how she had to
She
live with
needs to
herself.
do it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But it did cause somewhat of a stir for those who were in attendance.
She was actually very explicit about that.
I thought so too, but that's not how these people heard it. They
Well, I
heard her
understand.
say.
It's
A different thing.
it's a red flag. It's a red flag. Well, but even Germany, just the word Germany is a red flag for American Jews, and you know, and people listen. The book is called My Germany. A rabbi's wife came up to me, and I did a Shabbaton at a synagogue in Chicago, and not that rabbi's wife, but another rabbi's wife came up to me and said, "How dare you call the book My Germany?" You know, and I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "It's not your Germany." I said, "Well, it is because I'm writing about it." She said, "No, you should never put those two words together." She was so offended that I was claiming that Germany could be mine in any kind of way. And, you know, I knew that was the title of the book immediately. But she just, for a Jew to even say that was beyond the pale for her. She was quivering with rage. She was so angry. And so even two words can make people freak. She wasn't going to read the book, obviously.
No.
This was a little bit the same confusion between forgiveness and forgetting, which
Right.
are not the same thing.
No, not at all. Not at all. And
But I can see I see how people would confuse them, but they're not at all the same.
and they, you know, and they just, and those people at that university thought even reconciliation was going too far, because, and I don't know if they even understand what reconciliation is, and you know, I could have I wasn't going to argue. I could point them to many symposia that talk about this. That's where this intercultural dialogue is going. This intercultural international dialogue is going. How do you move forward? This intercultural, international, interreligious dialogue is going. Christians and Jews, Germans and Christians and non-Jews, Jews and Germans. How do you talk to each other? Children of survivors, children of perpetrators. Can they talk to each other? One of the most amazing things that happened to me in Magdeburg, this is the first reading I did in German, and I was so nervous. And of course, sometimes when you're really nervous, all that energy goes into a performance like an actor, because I have acted, and it comes up really well. And someone stood up about my age and said, "My mother also worked at that arms factory here in Magdeburg." And he said, every day that she worked there that year, she brought extra food at lunch, and she tried to sneak it to one of the prisoners. And he said, I was trying, and I wasn't sure what he was going on, and then he said, "I am hoping that maybe she gave some food to your mother." The whole room got very quiet, and I said, "I hope so too." To me, that right there was a moment of reconciliation. I mean, it was wonderful, and because you know, his mother might have been a Nazi, because all this stuff about nobody believed in the party, and I've read in English and German a wonderful book, Haben Sie Hitler gesehen? Sort of interviews of people over time, interviews of people of Hitler's progress, and except it seems for socialists and and people who were on the left, pretty much everybody they interviewed was in love with Hitler. They were crazy about him. And women especially were hysterical. They were mad for him. He was a demagogue. He spoke to the worst, and they loved him. And then suddenly, you know, nobody... What? I'm sorry? Who was cuter?
Stalin. I was.
I hope you
I
weren't
know
going
what
to
you
say
said.
what I was think you might have said. So you know, so all these people in Germany, even now, saying, "I'm surprised that my, you know, so and so was a Nazi." Why are you surprised? The most hilarious one was someone who said to me, and then I realized my grandfather had a Hitler mustache. What do you mean you realized your grandfather had a Hitler mustache? It's a Hitler mustache. It's not hard to figure out. You know?
Although it seems like, I mean, I think the whole emphasis on reconciliation is wonderful, and it's interesting to hear your impressions that it's not that anyone could claim that Germans aren't dealing with it or anything like that. On the other hand, you have this debate where a lot of Germans want to, or I don't know.
They want to move on.
Or want to kind of be seen as victims themselves, like with the book Thief that is so popular, right?
Right.
Looking at Germans themselves who somehow were victimized by the war or through the war. And so you have this debate whether, if there's a reemergence in art of seeing Germans as victims, is it as a substitute for seeing them as oppressors, or have they reached the point where both things are going on combined, where they see and recognize culpability, but then also have reached the stage where they're allowed to talk about their own.
I
You
think
know,
so.
it just seems a very complicated.
I was able to talk
Yeah.
about, when I was there, I said, yes, the firebombing of Dresden was horrendous, just like the firebombing of Coventry, the firebombing of the destruction of Hamburg. These acts of war were acts of war. This is what happens in war, you know. And Americans and the British have to admit the culpability of what they did. I mean, you know, but in this vast scheme of things, the Nazi war against the Jews was something completely different. So, but
Did you get a sense of that through your trips and dialogues, or kind of, you know?
This balancing act,
Yeah.
Where the biggest balancing act, oddly, was, can we wave the German flag? You know, when the World Cup was there, can we wave the German flag? Can we be proud if Germany is doing well? Can we wave the German flag? Can we hang the German flag from our windows without being seen as suddenly about to invade Poland again? That startled me. I didn't expect it to take that form, but that was a big discussion. I think because there's, you know, in their heads there's this memory of the Nazi flag everywhere, hanging from buildings and banners, and you know, you look at the movies, you look at the pictures, it was everywhere. So I think they're working it out. But that's the thing, they're discussing it. You know, it is open discussion, and it's hard to get away from it. You know, that's why those 3 days in Munich were a vacation for me. It's like, I don't have to talk about being a Jew, the son of a survivor. I can look at art. I can eat a meal. I can just mind my own business. I can be a tourist. Isn't that nice? You know? And when I stayed in Magdeburg with that very, 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 very distant relative or not relative, a lot of times we talked about things that had nothing to do with the war. Children, bicycling, you know, so it was wine. They have really good wine in East Germany. I didn't know that. Really good wines. That was a surprise.
Do you think? Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Well, I just have a really quick thing, which
Sure.
is, do you think you felt, you know, because you talked about when you were at Fordham, right?
Yeah.
That you were the token, you know, you were the token Jew.
One of a handful, maybe a dozen.
But I wonder, like, did you feel that your Jewishness was more a focus there than it was when you were in Munich, or?
I don't think so. Actually, that's the first place I encountered anti-Semitic chit-chat, you know, polite anti-Semitism, like Jew somebody down. I had never heard that before in any circle that I'd been in, and that was great. That was great because I was sitting in a group of friends, Italian and Polish Catholic, Italian Irish Catholic, sorry. And someone said, yeah, I was going to buy that, and he was trying to Jew me down, and then silence, because say, oh, turn. She tried not to turn it down. There's a real Jew over there. And I said, no problem. Where I come from, we say, Catholic somebody down. They thought it was real. And then I said, no, we don't really say that. And I bet they probably wouldn't say it after that again. But I heard stuff that I hadn't heard before, and it was an education. I mean, as I said, I've been just teaching gentleman's agreement and talking about polite anti-Semitism, which I had to explain to my students is a broad, weird term meaning anything that isn't violent in 1947. So using calling someone the K word is polite anti-Semitism. Doesn't feel polite to us because it's aggressive and violent, but back then, if you're not, or excluding someone from a job, that's polite. They had a little trouble working that out.
A couple of times you've mentioned either that few days in Munich where you didn't have to. I'm wondering in your personal life today, in today's world, when you're not working on a book and researching Germany and whatever, what impact as a second generation, what is life like for you? You have a partner, you raise kids together, right? Is there an impact that you feel like on a daily basis or a more regular basis?
Not anymore. That I think is that's one of the best things that this book did for me. I think it sort of cleared the air. It cleared the emotional air for me. This book and going to Germany, I think that it changed my life, it changed my writing life, because it freed me. I'd written in other genres before, many, but after this I felt as if I don't need to write about this anymore. I've said what I need to say. I would be really surprised, 6 books since then, I haven't said anything about this second generation of the Holocaust. I have done Jewish themes, but I've said enough. I've been publishing on this since 1978. I mean, even before Art Spiegelman. I mean, I'm in the very, very first crop of people writing about this in America. So it summed everything up. It freed me. Germany freed me, which isn't that bizarre, I wrote a historical novel set in 1905. I wrote a vampire fantasy. I mean, I started experimenting. I started going in directions that I never expected to go into. And I think it also, in an odd way, it prepared me to come back to MSU, because I spoke at a lot of universities and I actually taught some classes. And I came back in 11. I came back from teaching somewhere in Germany in 11, and I thought, damn, I miss teaching. And 3 days later, Steve Arch emailed me from the English department and said, have you ever thought of teaching for us? Would you ever consider it? I said, you're not going to believe it, but I was just sitting here at my desk thinking, I miss teaching. So I think it brought me back to my second love in life. And yeah.
Lev, you mentioned something that interests me. The post-Atlantis business about your parents looking back on the past before the war.
Yeah.
And seeing it in a beautiful light. Now, and what this brought to mind was the writing, particularly of that whole generation, but particularly Stefan Zweig.
Oh, my mother adored Stefan Zweig, and
yeah.
I've read a lot of his work in English.
Now it's very different because I think he died in '39.
Yeah.
He
committed suicide.
But was it 42?
In South America, it was later than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The war was underway. Yeah.
The war was. I know the war was on. In any event, when he looks back on the past, on the end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and all that world that he lived in, it must have been a difficult world, but you don't have that sense at all in his work. I mean, the history of yesteryear, for example, is a book in which he glorifies that period in a certain way, and one can almost not believe it. is there some sort of, I'm just interested in the business of looking back on the past after a horror, or during a horror, and seeing it in that sort of idealized light.
I think they did. I think they idealized it, but they also told me, my father grew up on a farm in the mountains, and there were, his life was, I talk about his life, he was pretty poor, but he didn't complain about it. He made it sound beautiful. He was a religious Jew. It was the simplicity of life sounded good, as he described it. And my mother's life was very different. It was very cultured, very intellectual, and Poland, of course, was intensely anti-Semitic. But even between granting those incidents, she had a good life.
Yeah.
She had a
Where
good
did she grow up?
Vilna.
In Vilna.
And so it was, they were part of the intelligentsia. Her father was swept up by the Nazis and taken to Pinar when they swept up teachers and people like that. And so it had a golden glow. Of course it would have a golden glow. But she was not mistreated by her parents, neither was my father. So those things, I don't think they were exaggerating what was good. I mean, she used to tell funny stories about her friends. She taught music to students. She was a piano teacher, which I found out only, actually I found that only from my father. Why she never told me that. But she loved music. They went to opera. And she told me the story of seeing Halevi's La Juive, where someone's burned to death. I don't know the opera. Someone is set. I don't know the opera. But she said she cried when she saw it, and so there. And her mother used to play guitar to her. I mean, there were all these beautiful memories of things. But again, those things could only go so far before she would start to cry. So
Sure. Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna get a ride. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
And I can recommend reading the book. I read it and it was very powerful and very good. So. Have a good spring break,
Yes,
everyone.
everyone.
1 week of no Jewish studies events next week. Our next one is
Can we go home now?
Yeah, our next one is David.
He's been here for 24
I know.
hours.
We have David Grossman, I think, is our next big event, so we're all looking forward to that. If we have flyers, if anyone wants to pick it up.
How do we get the book?
For his book, Jewish Studies has a couple more copies because we were discussing. Did you come to one of them?
I couldn't come to the first one. There's
I
another
think we
one.
might have no, we had our last one last night, but I think we have a couple extra copies in the Jewish Studies office.
Okay, can you put one aside?
Yeah.
With a Post-it and I'll come upstairs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
I'll
that's
do
what I
that.
said. I've applied,
Studies.
and I'm on the waiting list. They don't have a lot of money.
Do you have to go to the VMA
Do a lot of
process
dancing and
first?
then make.
Then the baby will
Well,
come.
they teach